Hello, and welcome to this safeguarding update presented by Sarah Neville from Knutsford Training and Consultancy on behalf of Childcare.co.uk. I thought I'd talk about safeguarding today because it's the area of practice I am most asked about by colleagues on the Independent Childminders Facebook group and on the Childminding Forum. It's a requirement of the EYFS 2017, the Early Years Foundation stage, which is our statutory framework, to have a safeguarding policy. You can call it what you want. I call mine Safeguarding and Child Protection Policy and Procedures to cover everything. And the link at the bottom of this slide takes you to a free sample document which gives you the contents of a typical safeguarding and child protection policy and procedures. The Early Years Inspection Handbook, which was, by the way, updated in April to remove references to prospect and tribal because all inspections are now carried out by Ofsted, also links with 3 other documents working together to safeguard children. I've heard a rumour this is being updated soon, but we'll have to wait and see. Inspecting safeguarding in early years education and skills settings, and keeping children safe in education. The final one, keeping children safe in education, is noted in the EYFS 2017, which says we need to be aware of it even though it's meant for schools. Therefore, some of the information I'm sharing is drawn from that. Let's have a look at some of the main areas that are coming up more than once in Ofsted inspections of late. Child neglect is an area of concern in a lot of local authorities. It's the single most reported concern. I live in Cheshire East, and Cheshire East Local Safeguarding Children Board have provided us with a range of new materials to use as a resource if we're concerned about a child being neglected. And we've got some leaflets for parents. I advise you to check your own website, your own local authority safeguarding children website, and see what's available. There's also some useful information on the NSPCC website, which you can pop into your safeguarding folder. If you've got one, there's no requirement to have a safeguarding folder, but it can be useful to keep all the safeguarding information together. Sexualised behaviour came up in recent training. What do you do if a child exhibits sexualised behaviour or behaviour of a sexual nature beyond their age and capacity? This is a traffic light tool on the Brook website. Normal behaviour is green, concerning behaviour is amber, and significant concerns are red. Very simple to use, it covers all ages, and it talks about what's normal for children with an inquiring mind and when practitioners and/or parents should be concerned. The safeguarding lead in your provision must record concerns and consider how they'll be followed up. As a general rule, you don't discuss concerns about sexual abuse with parents. You record and report and let someone else look into it. The UK's Modern Slavery Act 2015 makes modern slavery, sexual exploitation and all these other things on the slide an offence. You need to be aware of it and you need to know what to look out for. It's unlikely you'll be faced with it in day-to-day childminding or nursery life. There's lots of advice about modern slavery on the NSPCC website if you'd like to read more. The recent terror attacks in London and Manchester and the Grenfell Tower tragedy have led to some children being distressed while in early years provision because they've heard stories on the news, they've heard their parents talking about it at home, they've seen things on the television and things like that. Experts advise it's important to deal with their concerns honestly, but obviously in an age-appropriate way. There are some useful suggestions for talking to children in online articles if you Google. It's important while thinking about fire safety, that all providers do regular fire practices with their children. Nurseries might find it useful to consider how they'd react in the event of a lockdown as well. Racial abuse has always been an issue, but it's happening more and more regularly, possibly as a result of the terror attacks in London and Manchester. I don't know. You must log racist incidents to comply with the Early Years Inspection Handbook, and you should consider how you'd support children. Think about how well you actively promote British values and teach children about similarities and differences and other religions and cultures as well. That's a big part of respecting and accepting children from around the world. This also links to the prevent duty and British values, and it is very likely you will be asked a question during your Ofsted inspection about either the prevent duty or about British values and how you actively promote them in your provision. Remember, it's about keeping children safe from extremism and giving them the resilience to say no to being radicalised. You must also know how to report concerns about prevent. The reporting procedures are online, just need to Google it. But you should obviously include it in your safeguarding policy. Female genital mutilation is still at the forefront during Ofsted inspection as well, and that's newly noted in the EYFS, so we all need to be aware of it, and we do need to include something about it in our policy. It's likely your inspector will ask you a question like, to whom do you make a referral? The answer's on the slide. The police, and you ring the non-emergency line. When do you make a referral? Immediately if you have a concern. If you work with staff, remind them during supervisions that they need to be able to answer questions about FGM at inspection confidently, and that FGM can happen to all ages of children. Working Together to Safeguard Children was updated earlier this year to include more information about child sexual exploitation. It includes details about grooming and consent as well. I have a blog on the Childminding Forum you can find more information on, and you do need to reflect it in your safeguarding policy. Mobile phone and camera use comes up regularly in inspection. We've heard recently about nurseries specifically being asked, who could get hold of that tablet if, for example, they do their observations on a tablet and they leave it on a surface during the day. Could a child get onto Google? Could a child look at websites that are inappropriate? It's something you have to be confident about, and you must include it as part of your safeguarding policy. Think about things like, is everything password protected? Are you registered with the Information Commissioner's Office? Do children use Google, or do they use a child safe website, web browser to look at, and things like that. Attendance monitoring comes up in inspection. What would you do if a child failed to attend? You know we must log attendance, we've always had to. Every session, by the minute, when they walk in and when they leave. But we also need to think about what we'll do if a child doesn't arrive for their booked session. We should follow up with concerns with, for example, a call to parents, and we must report to the local authority if a funded child doesn't arrive. It's important to track other children's attendance, non-funded children's attendance as well, because it might be linked to safeguarding, to FGM, or to the prevent duty. Remember to record it as child was not brought rather than child did not attend. Consider just for a minute the implications of saying a child didn't attend. They can't get in the car and come to you, can they? Some inspectors are asking about peer-on-peer abuse during inspections. This is one of the requirements in Keeping Children Safe in Education, the handbook I mentioned earlier. It's when a child is coerced or bullied into doing something they don't want to do by other children. You need to be aware of it, especially if you look after older children. But even little ones can abuse and coerce their peers. So you might want a paragraph about it in your policy, or you might just want to talk about it. There's no requirement either way. Faith-based abuse is linked to Victoria Columbier and other children who have been killed, beaten, starved, killed by family members because they were believed to be possessed by evil spirits. It's important to know about it. You can mention it in your policy if you find it helpful, especially if you live in an area of the country where it's more likely to be prevalent, such as central London, for example. Personal care is now noted in the EYFS 2017 as a new area of focus, and you can see a little bit in number 20 there at the top. You need to consider what you think is appropriate in terms of touch, cuddles, tickles, helping children with eating, with drinking, looking after older children's care needs, things like that. Talk to parents, make sure you're all on the same page. Mostly it's about respecting children, linked to British values, of course, and making sure nobody does anything to them that makes them feel uncomfortable. Respecting them, listening to them, stopping when they say no. Non-mobile babies. There is a protocol for injury to non-mobile babies, and it's important that you know it and that you include it in your safeguarding policy. If a non-mobile baby or child is injured, it's unlikely to be an accident, and it must be recorded, and it would normally be reported. It also relates to disabled children, older children who are non-mobile as well. It might be innocent. Mum comes bringing baby saying she's horrified because she fell while holding baby. Or dad says older brother hit him with a car and points to a bruise on baby's head. We know that accidents can happen, nobody's saying that. However, it must be recorded, and if you're concerned, you can take advice from your local Safeguarding Children board. Children with special educational needs and disabilities are more at risk than other children of abuse and neglect. The figures show that year on year. If you care for a child with special educational needs or disabilities, you need to be aware of how they communicate, and of course you need to listen to them when they're talking to you. You need to keep an eye on their well-being and their involvement levels, note their learning characteristics, how they learn, and record any changes, which might mean they're not happy with something in their lives, or they're trying to tell you something. And obviously then you take advice if you're not sure. SnapMaps is a new online threat to children's safety that we need to be aware of. Online safeguarding moves so quickly, we need to keep up to date with these new risks. SnapMaps is part of Snapchat, and it gives the exact location of the user when they log in. Imagine if they then befriend a paedophile, pretending to be of a similar age. There is a way of turning it off, and you should monitor phones, supervise use, and obviously share information with parents. E-safety comes up a lot during inspection. How do you keep children safe online, and what do you share with parents about online safety? Think about what browsers and web protection you use, and we can't supervise children all the time, we know that. They might easily go onto sites, especially if they're using things like Google, so it's important that you're aware of where they can safely browse, what they're doing online, that you're looking back at their history. Cyber trauma is becoming more prevalent. Young children watch films, swipe to inappropriate sites, listen to games way above their level of understanding, and these can have serious effect on their well-being. We need to be aware of the dangers of the virtual world and protect young children using child-safe search engines, I've mentioned that before, such as Kiddle, reducing the use of consoles, mobile phones and tablets to ensure that they're supervised when using them. We've been advised that some Ofsted inspectors are asking providers what information they share with parents about online safety, as I said. I spotted a booklet in my local phone shop the other weekend, and there are lots of online sources. There's a useful leaflet on ChildNet, or netaware.org.uk, thinkyouKnow.co.uk, all sorts of places. Thinking about record keeping. When you're keeping records about children relating to safeguarding, it's important to remember they might be shared with other agencies. Use fact, not opinion, when writing things down, and don't use sweeping statements. Keep coming back to evidence and detail, because that's what other agencies will need to read. Where possible, we're encouraged to include the voice of the child as well. If a child has a safeguarding file, you should keep it separate from other paperwork relating to the child and keep it secure, lock it away safely. It's normally passed on to the next setting when the child leaves or when they move on, and you should have a form which both you and the other setting sign to confirm you've handed it over. You might need to check your local Safeguarding Children Board website. Cheshire East certainly has a form on it. A quick reminder about whistleblowing for your staff as well as for you as the owner or manager of your provision. Specifically here, I'm talking about staff, and you can remind them during your supervisions or in staff meetings. If they have a concern about the way you are working with children, or if they note bad practice from other staff members in the setting, or when they go on the school run or something like that, they must record and report it immediately. They shouldn't speak to you or the other person or try to investigate. They mustn't sit on it or wait to see what happens next. They have a duty to keep children safe. And this should be stated clearly in your safeguarding policy, in the whistleblowing section, and they should read it and understand it. A lot of information has been coming out recently about duty of care in sport, partly as a result of recent allegations of historic abuse in football and other sports. I don't think you need to include it in your policy, but you do need to be aware of it and to be able to talk about it if you're asked. The most important thing, as always, is to listen to the children and act on any comments they might make straight away. Promote a listening culture, and you're on the right tracks. If you can say that to the inspector, they'll nod. It comes up a lot in safeguarding documents. The Children and Social Work Act is now law. It focuses on child sex safeguarding practice, local arrangements for protecting children, looked after children and things like that, compulsory relationship and sex education in schools, and help for refugee children. You can read more online. You don't need to include it in your policy, but I think it's a good idea to be aware of it because it all comes under the safeguarding banner. And the last one I want to talk about is accident reporting, because it came up recently during an inspection. A child bumped when the inspector was watching, and the assistant working with the child didn't think it was serious enough to record. So they didn't record it to share it with parents, and they didn't tell the manager about it. The inspector was quite shocked about that and wrote it up as an action, and the childminder didn't get the grade she'd hoped to get as a result. So remind your staff, if a child has an accident, however minor, it must be recorded and it must be reported. It's important to embed a culture of reporting all accidents, injuries and first aid administration to parents, and if you've got staff, to the manager. This is free, this document you can see here. You can download it from that link. This is a new information guide. It will be on the website soon, and it will link to this presentation. It contains updated information on the subjects I've been talking about in this presentation and other subjects for childminders and group providers. I hope you found this presentation useful and informative. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.